Hey guys, welcome to Wrestling Daze and welcome to this review of Mr. McMahon, the Netflix docuseries. And honestly, I've got 22 pages of notes. This thing was absolutely epic. It touched on so many subjects, and I want to start by telling you if you should watch it or not, because that's the question, isn't it? I think a lot of people are going to be tuning into this video and they've only got one question on their mind, and that is it worth watching? Should I watch it? And my honest answer is yes. I think you should. It's hard to say as to whether you're going to actually learn anything, because if you are a die-hard fan that really knows the history of WWE, I don't think there's anything here that you're going to be surprised by. But what it does provide is constant context. Like, it is constantly telling you little stories that you may not have heard. It's constantly giving you opinions that you may not have heard. There's constant quotes coming from different people that you won't have heard. So even though the big talking points like the steroid trial or the Montreal Screwjob or the Benoit incident, right, or obviously the Janelle Grant stuff at the end, like, even though wrestling fans know about all of these things, there's a lot of material that is there around them and other little things as well. So I would say it was worth watching. I've just spent 6 hours watching it and I don't regret it. I thought it was done really well. I suppose the other question is, how does it portray Vince? I personally think that it portrays him as being quite cold. I think it portrays him as being business first, always. But that's the Vince that I expected. So it didn't really change my opinion of Vince. Like, I went in feeling quite uncomfortable about Vince because, of course, all the scandals, the allegations. And so I went in feeling quite uncomfortable about Vince, but equally, it's Vince. Like, he is the most important person in the history of wrestling. Without him, I wouldn't have the form of entertainment that I love the most. So it is a very complex relationship that wrestling fans have with Vince McMahon. And I don't think anything here really changed my opinion. I think if you go into this hating Vince, you'll come out of it hating Vince. If you go into this kind of with a warmth towards Vince, I think you'll still come out of it with a warmth towards Vince. But he is portrayed as business first and always. I think what was quite surprising for me was we really dug into his relationship with Shane McMahon, his son, and that was quite a surprise because we don't really dig into his relationship with Steph so much, and we really don't dig into his relationship with Linda at all. She is there, she is interviewed, but we don't really dig into their marriage at all, right? We do look back at how it started, but really, the family member we spend the most time on is Shane, and it's really interesting, really interesting. We touch on Owen Hart and his tragic passing, of course, all the Janelle Grant stuff at the end, the steroid trial, the ring boy scandal is mentioned. I mean, it's a lot of a history lesson in there. I mean, a lot of the history of WWE. So there's a lot of times where they're just showing the company growing, basically. But yeah, I think if you don't know everything about WWE and you think that you will learn some stuff, then you will definitely learn some stuff, because I have come away feeling like that was a worthwhile watch. And I'm someone that's watched WWE for over 30 years. So if I can come away thinking that I've not wasted my time, I'm sure many of you will come away feeling the same. So I've got little quick breakdowns of each episode, just little things that I tweeted out. My plan is, now that we've done a bit of an overview at the start, go through these breakdowns. Then we'll go episode by episode and we'll go through my 22 pages of notes, and I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. I would not be stunned if this video ends up being 50 minutes, an hour. I mean, I really don't want to be going over an hour. So let's try and get through this as quick as we can. So episode 1 is called Junior, and it obviously is a history lesson. It kind of talks about Vince, the fact he was raised poor, which might be a surprise to people. The fact that he wasn't just handed WWF like many people believe that he was. He really had to put the shift in, put a work in. And I think what I learned here was the fact that his dad was quite cold towards him when they finally met up, even to the point where Vince thinks that his dad maybe didn't even want to see him succeed, because Vince actually bought the company off his dad, and the agreement was, I'm going to pay in installments, and if I miss a payment, then not only will you get the company back, but you can have all the money that I've paid you so far. And the question is asked, do you think your dad wanted you to make all of those payments, or do you think he wanted you to fail? And honestly, I think Linda is not sure about whether Vince's dad actually wanted him to succeed or not. So, I mean, there's people out there that think that Vince was just given the company. That is not true, right? He had to buy the company, and his dad seemingly was quite happy for him to not succeed in doing that. So yeah, Junior, it's a history lesson. It's a look back. It takes you from Vince joining WWF to buying the company from his dad, and then on to WrestleMania 1. There's a couple of lawsuits in here that get mentioned, but episode 2 teases bigger scandals. And episode 2 I thought was really good. Like, that I thought was a fine intro. Like, there's definitely bits in there, like we've mentioned, that I thought was noteworthy. But episode 2, scandal heavy. Steroids. Rita Chatterton, who, of course, is the female ref who had, allegations against Vince. We've got the Superfly, Jimmy Snuka scandal, gets kind of touched on briefly. The Ring Boy scandals, they all get mentioned. History mixed in as well. I mean, we are going from WrestleMania 2, and we kind of go forward 10 years to like 93, 94 now. So constantly we're moving forward, right? Some great footage. I mean, there really is some really interesting footage in there, and quotes. Thought that this was a step up from episode 1, sorry. Then we've got, and this story as well, which I really liked, which is Vince talking about how he managed to convince Andre to partake in WrestleMania 3. I really enjoyed that. It's not a very in-depth story, but he just says like how Andre was kind of off filming films, and he had to go up to him and say, look, come back, let's do one more thing. Let's do the biggest wrestling show that the world has ever seen. And he tells Andre like 90-odd thousand seats, and Andre just laughs at him, but agrees to come back. And as I said, it's only like 40-odd seconds long, but it was just a good little story. So, right, on to episode 3, and it's Screwjob, right? So back to the history lesson, and a step down from episode 2. I think episode 2 is really good because there's so many scandals, so much stuff to kind of hear Vince talking about, right? Here, it's the Montreal Screwjob. And honestly, this has been covered so many times. I've heard Vince's side, and yeah, I feel like every angle of this has been covered. Obviously, it's not only the Montreal Screwjob, like there are other things that are in there. There is a line where Vince says, a lot of times he says things different to what he's actually thinking. I've got the full quote, and it's really interesting, right? So yeah, this I'd say is the worst episode for me. The Mr. McMahon character is teased and arrives in episode 4. Episode 4 is titled Attitude. So it's mostly a look at the Attitude Era. The final 10 minutes is Owen Hart's death, and honestly, I found myself getting a bit angry at points. I found myself getting frustrated. It was heartbreaking, of course it is. I mean, honestly, they show the pictures of Owen lying in the ring. They're pictures that you can find online, but they're not pictures that really get circulated that much. They're actually pictures that I hadn't seen until a few years ago. And it's Owen after he's fallen and he's lying in the ring. I would say it's essential that you kind of view that bit, the Owen Hart bit, because they obviously talk about the accident. You hear Vince talk about it, and what frustrates me is there's no emotion in Vince's voice. He even talks about the decision to carry on with the show, and I kind of thought that he would say something like he was so busy that like he was trying to focus on Owen and focus on the family, focus on the situation, and I was really expecting some sort of answer like that, which is why the show continued, right? Because his focus was elsewhere. He wasn't worried about the show continuing. He was worried about Owen and the family and sorting that. That was his priority, not the show. That's not the answer he gives. The answer he gives is, you know, people came out to see a show, and thankfully the lights were not on when Owen fell, so they didn't see the incident, or at least they couldn't quite see like what had happened. So I wanted to make sure that, you know, we gave them the show that they came for, basically. And I found that a very frustrating answer, because I think I've always, in my mind, kind of justified that decision of carrying on with the show. In my head, I've always justified it as Vince was in shock and he was putting the family first. And I don't know, I just didn't quite get that impression from the answer that he gave. Plus also the fact that you are shown the blood on the edge of the ring where Owen had fallen. And they make a really good point in the documentary, like, you made wrestlers go out there and wrestle when they know that their friend has just passed away and his blood is on the edge of the ring. I mean, as I said, it, I think, will make you angry. It will make you frustrated. It's heartbreaking. As I've put here, it's essential viewing. There's not really a way that I can word it that's going to paint an accurate picture without you watching it. So that is one that you'll have to watch and make your own mind up on. But I just had a whole cocktail of emotions as I was watching that part of the documentary. A big step up this, not just for that bit, but like the whole thing I thought was a step up from episode 3. Then we have Vince talking about his favorite wrestler, who I already knew was Dr. Jerry Graham. Then here, episode 5, The Family Business. This is the best episode for me because this really digs into the family dynamic. This is where we see that Shane has always kind of struggled with trying to prove his worth to his dad. And you also kind of, it's quite interesting how Vince says that his father never kind of showed him much attention, showed him any affection. And you can tell that that is how Vince treats Shane as well. Like, Vince treats Shane the same way that his dad treated him. It's cold, it's heartless. And you can tell that Shane is affected by that. But we touch on Steph and like some of the stuff that like Vince wanted to do, and there's some interesting stories in there. So for me, the best episode I would say is episode 5. It's all about the McMahon family dynamic, loads of quotes, stories, and great insight. It's an amazing look at Shane's relationship with his dad. The timeline at this point now gets to ruthless aggression. And it says the final episode preview. So, you know, that kind of bit at the end that tells you what's coming next shows news coverage of the Janelle Grant lawsuit. So we know that Janelle Grant is going to be heavily featured in episode 6, but that's no great surprise. So episode 6 is the finish. And I just put, wow, we revisit the Shane and Vince relationship. I kind of thought that we'd boxed it off, but we actually go back to it, right? And I think they try to put a nice bow on it as well. Kind of get the feeling that they try to make it like a nice story arc. But obviously, as they're editing that, I don't think they're prepared for what's about to drop. Maybe in their mind, this was going to be quite a nice finish. Like, they've kind of gone with Shane coming back and him being embraced and, you know, Vince being a bit upset because, you know, it's a real moment, a personal moment. I mean, we know that Shane would drop his foot in it, you know, with that Royal Rumble a few years after. So, like, I don't know, it's a bit cherry picked. That's how it feels. It kind of felt to me like we need a nice story. We need something that can have a nice beginning, middle, and end. Let's go with Shane and Vince because we can have that moment at WrestleMania 32 where after that match, Shane goes back in, he embraces his dad, and his dad's upset, and it's a lovely moment, and, you know, that'll show, like, you know, a bit of warmth, and maybe we end on that, and maybe that was going to be part of the original finish. But then, of course, the whole Janelle Grant stuff drops, and we go in a different direction. So, yeah, we revisit Shane and Vince. We also touch on the Benoit tragedy, and we talk about young wrestler deaths, because there's been a lot of wrestlers like Eddie Guerrero, of course, that have passed away young, and we go through like a whole list. Then there's 28 minutes on the lawsuits and the craziness of Vince retiring. Then don't forget he came back. And then, of course, he resigned in early 2024. Feels like ages ago that Vince resigned and was gone forever. But it was only earlier this year, which I was shocked at. I don't know why, but in my mind, he walks away like last year. But it was actually just before the Royal Rumble this year. So my brain had kind of remembered it a long time ago, much further back than that. So I think this was the second best episode in my opinion. And I just wanted to put a little something at the end for people. So I put, if you're open-minded, then watch it. It's very well done, like the whole series. Overall, it paints Vince as quite heartless and cold, certainly with the Shane stuff and the family stuff, right? He is a business-first guy. But that's the Vince I expected to see. So overall, I think this will still frustrate anti-Vince viewers at times. The reason I wrote that is because I think it's hard for me to know who I'm talking to. I could be talking to the biggest Vince hater right now, but equally I could be talking to someone that's the biggest Vince lover who just loves what he's done for wrestling. You know, it's hard to answer that question of, will I learn anything? Because, again, there could be someone watching that's only been watching WWE for a few months. Yes, you're going to learn loads. But if you're someone like me that's been watching for 30-odd years, well, I don't think that you will learn anything in regards to, oh, I never knew that happened, right? But it's the context around it all. Right, it's hearing Vince's side of things. It's hearing some stories which you definitely wouldn't have heard before, and just little bits and bobs, really. But all those little bits and bobs from across a 6-hour docuseries really do add up into making this, I think, like I would say, unmissable. I think this is really essential viewing if you are a WWE fan, right? So those are my thoughts. I think I might have one more here. There is a clip here. I can't play them due to copyright, but Vince finishes the whole thing talking about his legacy. They do have to cobble together footage from 2021, some other clips of Vince, because Vince actually doesn't do any more interviews, I think, after 2022. So they have to kind of use footage that they've got from 2021 or clips from other places. But it's a really interesting end to the whole thing. So, but yeah, here, look, I've said my score is 8.5. Episode list in order, if you just wanted to watch what I think are the best episodes. I think 5 is the best, focusing on the family. Then I think 6, the final one. So you could do 5, 6, and I think you've watched the best 2. I think 2, because of the amount of scandals that's in there, is next. Then you've got 4, which I think is the Owen passing, the tragedy. 1 is a nice intro. I think 1 kind of gets the ball rolling pretty well, but you won't really learn much from it. And then I think 3 is the worst because of it being the screw job, and just sort of know everything about the screw job, so I didn't really take much from that. So for me, that's the list of episodes in order. That's my score. Loads of talking points and quotes, and 22 pages of notes.